podcast. And in the UK, about 40,000 homes get repossessed every single year. And obviously the mortgage company, they want to protect that asset because they want to be able to put it on the market and sell it, and they're duty bound to get as much as they possibly can. If you're dealing with a bank, a repossessed property, they're not going to entertain ideas such as exchange delay completion, purchase lease options, vendor finance. They just want to get the money in, clear it and move on. At the end of the day, if the mortgage is not being paid, there will come a point where the lender will say enough is enough, and they'll take the property owner to court. It's stressful, it's a lot to do in a short amount of time, but obviously we can help people. Why don't we try and find the people who are in financial difficulty, who know that ultimately they're going to get repossessed because they can't afford to pay the mortgage, and maybe we can negotiate with them. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Property Magic Podcast, in which I'm going to talk about the repossession process. Now, this is important because many property investors look for repossessed properties. These are where the property owner, for some reason, was unable to keep up with the mortgage payments, and their mortgage company has been given possession, and they're going to sell that property for less than the true value. So people go online looking for repossessed properties being sold by estate agents. They go to auctions looking for that property, trying to get a cheap deal. But there are two problems with doing that. First of all, the property is often damaged because the owner, understandably, was a bit upset that they were repossessed, and they might damage the property on their way out to get rid of some of their aggression and tension. So often these properties need work doing to them. But the second point is more relevant actually, which is that we're not really helping the owner of that property. I mean, once they're repossessed, someone's going to buy it. But I would actually like to suggest that a better way to buy repossessed properties, a more ethical way of buying properties like that, would be actually buying them before they are repossessed, because there are many benefits for you and also the owner of that property. And this links to the last episode of the Property Magic Podcast, which is about ethical property investing. I very much recommend you listen to that after listening to this one. It will make a lot more sense and put it into context. So let's first of all understand the repossession process. And in the UK, about 40,000 homes get repossessed every single year. Some of those are residential properties where families are living there, and some of them are rental properties. Now, what happens when someone starts to miss their mortgage payments? The lender will send letters, they'll call, trying to get that person to pay the mortgage, because lenders, they don't want to repossess people. If you think about it, there's a whole load of hassle and expense incurred in the repossess process. They would much rather that the property owner pays their mortgage on time every single month, and then at the end of the term, they either refinance or pay that loan back because they've placed that money there, they're getting a certain return, that's nice and easy. So they don't want to repossess. And also, it's not very good for them, publicity-wise, to repossess properties. And when COVID came, the government made it very clear if people were in financial difficulties, they wanted mortgage companies to take it easier on people who were in financial difficulty. However, at the end of the day, if the mortgage is not being paid, there will come a point where the lender will say enough is enough, and they will take the property owner to court. Now, when they go to court, there's obviously costs associated with that. You've got the solicitor's costs, the legal costs, the court costs, etc. And what will happen is the judge will say to the property owner, what's happening, why you're not paying the mortgage, and the owner will explain what's going on. And the court will normally say, right, you've got 28 days to come back to court for a second time to tell us how you can resolve this, how you can clear the arrears and get back on track. What normally happens, they go back to the second court hearing, and unsurprisingly, the person's situation is no different or maybe even slightly worse. There's no way of them paying back the debt they owe, and so the property is then given to the mortgage company, and then a bailiff is appointed, and in some time, it could be weeks, it could be months, depending how busy the courts are. That bailiff will turn up, they will evict the people in the property, they might seize possessions, and also they will board up the property and make it secure, because if the property is empty, there's risks it could get broken into, vandalised, etc., etc. And obviously the mortgage company, they want to protect that asset because they want to be able to put it on the market and sell it, and they're duty bound to get as much as they possibly can. So if you go online, you might often see properties listed as being sold on behalf of a particular bank or building society, and they often say what price has been offered because they have a 7-day and sometimes a 14-day notice. They're giving people the opportunity to come and offer more money for that property. if they can get as much as possible, they will clear the debt. If there's any money left over, that money will go to the owner of the property. So they have a duty of care to try and do that. But ultimately, they want to get the property sold. If you're dealing with a bank, a repossessed property, they're not going to entertain ideas such as exchange, delay completion, purchase lease options, vendor finance. They just want to get the money in, clear it, and move on to their next deal. So we, as property investors, instead of going and looking for the properties that have already been repossessed, why don't we try and find the people who are in financial difficulty, who know that ultimately they're going to get repossessed because they can't afford to pay the mortgage, and maybe we can negotiate with them. And let's make some numbers up here. Let's say a property is worth £100,000 and the mortgage on the property was maybe £70,000. Well, all of the costs associated with the repossessions, going to court, all the admin, they're going to court twice, the legal fees, the court fees, the bailiff fees, and then actually selling the property, all of those costs are added onto the outstanding mortgage. So let's say the original mortgage was £70,000, it might be another, say, £10,000 of costs, so the debt comes up to £80,000. Now, as a repossessed property, if you or I, as an investor, were looking to buy that, often a little bit of work's needed, we'd probably want to try and buy that property 25% below market value. So if we bought it for £75,000 and the debt, the mortgage plus all the costs were £80,000, that means there's a £5,000 shortfall. Now, the lender might accept that money and they would then pursue the owner of the property for that £5,000 shortfall. So once someone's repossessed, that's not the end of the problems. For 6 years, they could be chased, their credit rating's ruined. It's really not a good scenario to be repossessed. However, what if we could find that person when the debt is still £70,000 before all these costs are incurred, but they know they're not going to be able to pay the mortgage? And we can maybe buy the property at a discounted rate of, say, £75,000, which realistically is what it would sell for. But if we can buy for 75 before it's repossessed and the debt is still only 70 because they've not been to court, they've not had the bailiff and the sales costs, etc., then actually there's still £5,000 that goes to the owner. That means the owner can go and start afresh. They're not ruining their credit rating, and they may want to buy in the future. They might just want to rent, given the problem they've had being a property owner. But this is a far more ethical solution. We're buying at exactly the same price, whether it's before or after the repossession, but also because the owner has got some money and because they've not been treated unfairly by the mortgage company, which I'm sure mortgage companies wouldn't do that, but that's how they might feel. They're not going to trash the property on the way out either. So that means you have a property in better condition. You've actually helped the owner in a better alternative to waiting to get repossessed. And I think if we put some good karma out there, which I talked about in the last episode of the Property Magic podcast, is always a good thing to do. So understanding, if someone says they're getting repossessed, we need to understand where are they in that process. Are they at the point where they're not paying the mortgage, the bank's calling them, sending them letters, and they know ultimately they could get repossessed? Or have they been to court the first time? Have they been to court the second time? Or have they even got a date for the eviction? Now, most sellers, most motivated sellers, when they have problems, they bury their head in the sand and sometimes leave it too late. They might contact us because they've got a difficult problem. I've had people contact me despite trying to get hold of them for months and months. They call me and they're being evicted the very next day. And actually, we have in the past been able to move quick enough by going to court, get an emergency court hearing to show that we are able to buy the property quickly, and we've stopped that person being repossessed. However, even once someone has been repossessed, once they've been removed from the property by bailiffs, you actually have up to 2 weeks. If you can pay off the mortgage in full, they can actually get that property back. And not a lot of people know that. It's stressful, it's a lot to do in a short amount of time, but obviously we can help people. How do we find these people? Well, look, we need to find motivated sellers. There are all the ways of marketing. We can look for properties online. We don't necessarily know if someone's in financial difficulty, but there are clues, such as if the price keeps on dropping, if in the description of the property says things like reduced to sell or attractively priced, it means that seller's a motivated seller and maybe they're trying to sell it quickly, and repossession might be the reason, or there might be all sorts of other reasons, other problems they've got. They just want to get rid of that property quickly. So hopefully now you understand the repossession process in the UK, you're better equipped to be able to help people who need to sell their properties quickly. The point is finding out where in the process they are, and if we can stop them from getting repossessed and incurring all those costs, you can do a better deal for them and also a better deal for you. I do hope you enjoyed watching this episode and listening to this episode of the Property Magic Podcast. If you're watching online on my YouTube channel, I'd love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also make sure you hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified any time we bring out a brand new video. And until next time, as ever, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill.